I'm doing more and more in health and nutrition. The big barriers to good health and nutrition relate around climate change at the moment. And so we're doing quite a lot of research around how we can better improve nutrition and health services in the face of climate change. So I'm not an expert in policy and climate change, but I can speak from what I've learned on the ground and some of the things you were talking about this morning about how communities are responding to climate change and how we can work with communities to improve the situation in the face of climate change. A few words about me.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm not sure if you need to say anything, Sam, unless you'd like to.
No, only that I'm also not an expert in net zero emissions.
It's like me. We're hearing a lot about climate now.
So I've got some really tough questions for you. Helen?
My name is Helen Osiolo. I'm a researcher at MECS, Modern Energy Cooking Services, which is a part of Geography and Environment department here at Loughborough University. I have a PhD in economics. I specialize in environmental economics and public finance. My areas of research have been always on energy and climate change, so I should be able to answer a few questions, but my colleague will also say so much about MECS, just to give you an idea of what is MECS and what MECS is currently handling. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Yasmeen Khalifa. I'm a research associate for the Modern Energy Cooking Services program. We sit in the STEER Center in the School of Social Sciences. And so we are, I can talk about MECS. We are an 8-year research program. We are based in Loughborough University, of course, and we for other organizations, we are considered as a research knowledge partner. Our aim is to improve the enabling environment, supply chain, and consumer awareness towards the to accelerate access to modern energy cooking services. And we work with, you know, NGOs, UN agencies, private sector, academia, all organizations, whether they are public or private organizations. We work with them to accelerate access to modern energy cooking. We also work in different contexts. We work in rural, urban, informal settlements, humanitarian and displacement settlements. We also work with the World Food Program to explore challenges and opportunities for accelerating modern energy cooking in schools. So this is like a quick introduction to MECS and what we're doing, and maybe when we start, you know, the conversation, we can say more about our work. So one of the other things that I was, so as a researcher with MECS, you get to do a lot of different, to work with different organizations, and you work on different projects. But one of the themes that I was leading the last few months was gender equality and equity, women empowerment for in the modern energy cooking sector. So yes, so that's a brief introduction about MECS and what we're doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So Janet,
I'll pop her a message where you might need to start in earnest.
so we're going to start in earnest. Janet will join us when she's able. So I was interested in what you said, Paula, about health and how climate change wasn't your focus, but you became aware that climate change was impacting health. Could you talk a little bit more about that? When did you have the aha moment? Was it a moment, or was it
I don't think it was an aha moment. I think it's accumulated over time. I predominantly work on programs to try and improve nutrition in women and young children. And at the beginning of my career, we were, you know, thinking about education programs and raising awareness of, you know, appropriate foods to feed in different environments. And as you do that kind of work, you end up talking in community groups, and community groups tell you about their challenges. And one of the challenges that was coming up more and more in those discussions was, well, the things that we used to grow and successfully grow and feed our children are no longer successfully growing and coming to fruition and in abundance to feed our children. So even in rural areas that are traditionally had the types of foods that you need to feed infants and young children, And part of the reason for that, obviously, is that things are changing. The climate's changing, the soil's changing, the ecology of the area that we were working in has changed as well as more trees have been cut to make way for other things. And so it's probably over a period of time the eureka moment starts to happen, that you start to realize, well, I can't keep working on nutrition programs and health services and just focusing on what the health service is delivering in terms of providing information to people, because people need more than that. They need, communities want to work out a way forward with the changes. And it's a bit like the discussion we were having this morning about the fact that communities are perhaps less aware of what other countries' role in this is. But certainly policymakers do have an understanding of the role of the global north in the inequities of climate change. But what communities want on the ground is, well, this is happening. They're not necessarily totally aware of how it can change. So some communities are, some not, depending on where you're working. But what they want for today is the solution. You know, how can we move forward at this moment in time? How can we grow our crops so that they come to fruition? And how can we cook our food in a way that works with the resources that are available? So the projects that we've worked on have been mostly around working with communities to resolve issues that are there, as opposed to the higher level thinking about policy and changing global policy, which is a bigger thing to do, but it's not been the focus of what
So
we've
it's
been
very
doing.
much about coming up with solutions to real world problems felt today.
Yes, with
Pragmatic.
communities, yes, yeah.
Yasmeen, you were saying that gender was an important part of the MECS work as well. Could you just expand a little bit?
Yeah, okay, so I might say something about the use of firewood for cooking. So in many low-income countries in Africa and Asia, they rely on firewood for cooking. And who's doing most of the cooking? Women. And who's staying with women at home? Children. So they are the most affected by the air pollution, household air pollution related to the cooking with firewood. So the MECS program is, they are under clean cooking, there are different categories of other cooking fuels. But MECS focuses on the higher tier cooking fuels, and electric cooking is one of the is being well recognized now as an alternative for firewood. And from our research at MECS, we started to realize that it's the most efficient cooking alternative for firewood. So we're trying to, accelerate access to electric cooking as well. But we're looking at other aspects, and we will talk about this. But if I go back to the gender theme, so with the MECS framework, we found that there is a gap in gender data. And this is one aspect. In general, there is a gap in gender data, in gender disaggregated data in the energy system. And when it comes to clean cooking, there is a gap in this area. And data is really important, because for any innovation or any if we are considering, accelerating access, we cannot to modern cooking, we cannot do this without having enough data. And from the other perspective, how we're going to finance these projects. So carbon finance is becoming very important now to finance such projects, right? So the more you can prove evidence that you are contributing to SDG 5, the more you can attract funding for these projects. So they are not looking only on the carbon reductions, but also like projects that come with contribute to gender equality and women's empowerment can attract more funding. So we decided that there is a gap here and we need to address it. We started by developing a new gender framework for the modern energy cooking sector to measure and monitor, and to assess first and then measure and monitor the impacts of the modern energy cooking, impact on the gender impact. And then after the introduction of such projects, you can measure the impact and prove it. And so it has both sides, to attract more funding and at the same time to improve the quality of life for women and children. So this was our focus in the framework, is to develop a framework that is practical. Project developers can use it to measure and assess their progress towards gender equality and women's empowerment. And also we wanted to get more women involved into the sector. It's an important sector and usually dominated by men. So we need more women to be involved, not just as end users. We want them to be involved as, we want to see women designers designing the new technologies for the modern energy cooking. We want to learn from their experience of cooking to improve the design of such projects. And so the framework looked at different domains, starting with the access to modern energy cooking. The second domain was to access to resources related to modern energy cooking. We're looking at the level of participation of women at the household level, in decision making at household level and at the public level. And also we're looking at the enabling environment. And under the enabling environment, we're looking at the policy context, the physical environment, social and political, policy, social environment context. So all of these are really important for the gender, to measure and monitor gender in this section. So I hope I answered this.
Thank you very much. Helen, you mentioned that you were interested in the economic consequences of MECS. Do those benefits accrue to men and women, or do they accrue specifically to women, or are there big benefits for women? I guess is the question.
Yes, I think there are a lot of benefits for women, especially when you transit to use modern technologies. And we have done a lot of research in different contexts in Asia and also in Africa. And we have shown that if you are able to encourage women to use these technologies, like electric pressure cooker, which is one of the technologies we are highly promoting. And we're actually saying that when you look at rural areas, they don't have like electricity. So we have also other technologies like solar powered technologies that can enhance uptake of these technologies like the EPC. And through that, we can see women are saving a lot of time. So there's a lot of time savings. Like for instance, looking at one of the strategies of Tanzania, they have a new strategy for clean cooking, which is from 2024 to 2030. They indicate that by like every year, household saves about 790 hours. When you convert that, that is about 36 days or so, if they transit to use modern energy cooking. And that is very significant. That time can be used to, engage in income generating activities, engage in productive activities. And also when you look at it economically, they save a lot of money. There's some study that has shown that a lot of expenditures is saved from reducing spendings on charcoal and firewood, which actually helps them save a lot of money. That can also improve, their spendings from, their spendings from fuel to other items. And then still, when you're looking at health consequences in terms of expenditure are also very high. Like for instance, when they are exposed to indoor air pollution, they get respiratory illnesses, they get burns, they get eye infections, and many other diseases and illnesses beyond respiratory illnesses. So the cost of looking for consultation, transport cost, the medical care, etc., actually, burdens the women the most. And when you look at these, if they actually transit to use modern energy, they'll get to save a lot in terms of health expenditures. And when you translate, when they actually move these resources from health, they can actually improve their general well-being. So we see now women being able to use even that time that they wasted going to the hospital to use actually in productive ways. There are also other ways that women can also support, you know, economically, like the time they save, they can also empower their children, you know, because when you cook with EPC, studies have shown, I think there's the study in, there's a study in one of the schools that shows that even cooking from schools, teachers can actually participate in teaching. Yeah, in teaching as well as in cooking. They can actually do the same thing at the same time and save time. So we can see even at home, yeah, parents can also do this. Multitask can also save time and also improve education outcomes as well. So I would say that these economic consequences are not really tied to economics alone, but they are also tied to other qualitative aspects like health, education, income generation, and etc. So I will stop there.
Yes, Sam, you were speaking this morning about the impact of floods and extreme heat in Ghana, and one of the examples I think you used was a paediatric ward, and that raised the question for me is whether there are sort of differential impacts on genders in Ghana, and you know who suffers the most from these extreme events, and also who takes the responsibility for developing resilience as well. Is that primarily women, or is that something that's more shared?
Yeah, I guess the experiences that she shared will relate to Ghana very well. And so in all these instances, you have women and children that are bearing the most brunt of some of these things we are talking about. In this particular setting I showed of the pediatric hospital, I was talking about the issue of, you know, ventilation, having ventilation, artificial ventilation as against natural ventilation, and the fact that if you have the artificial ventilation, you know, chances are that you know, carbon dioxide is going to build up in the ward, and that is what we saw in that particular instance. And so I think it cuts across most of these our countries in the developing settings. That the children and women are the ones that are, you know, bearing the most brunt. If you talk about who takes up the responsibility to as it were, to make situations better, I would say still the onus falls on them, you know, the women, because they can be very innovative and you know, find solutions to be able to circumvent some of these issues. As she said, if you women will save a lot of time in terms of if they are using these cleaner energy sources, and that can be quantified. If you can quantify that in terms of the, you know, take the, we now have monetary, we quantify them in monetary ways, then they could be making a lot of savings. She also talk about the health issues, you know, if they don't go through some of these instances, they don't have health issues that they have to go to hospital and spend, and so they do savings on that. So generally speaking, I see the situations in our countries are quite similar. The women are having most of these challenges, as you know, together with the children that they are with. Although there's a lot of role that men will have to play in this as well.
Thank you. Comments and questions from the floor?
Some questions in mind. The big one. So I'm from Nigeria. my early years in Nigeria. And this is what's been said so far. What I'd like to know is, in your research, are we, and I know that yes, it's quite common in villages, in rural areas, but I also do know that use of firewood is used a lot, even in big cities like Lagos, Abuja, and the rest of it, especially for parties and all that. So where are we targeting? Is it both sides, or is there a lot of focus maybe on the rural areas, and how are we doing that? And then the second one is, yes, I think you alluded to it in the last sentence when you were speaking, is the role of men in all this, because we do know that, yes, there's a lot of the women and the children face challenges, but I do know that given the kind of society that we live in developing countries, I do know that there's a big role for men also in that, because and so how are we educating men to understand their role and to also play their role? That's my question. Those are my questions.
Who would like to go first?
Okay, so regarding the modern energy services program, we work in different contexts. So it also does, we focus on urban settlements as well. So it's not only rural and informal and military space settings. We look at the national level as well, because there is a target. Some countries started to include this in their NDCs to reduce the carbon emissions, specifically for clean cooking. And yeah, maybe Helen would like to talk about the strategy.
Yeah, maybe I can mention about Tanzania. I want to say that both men and women needs to be, we need to create awareness for both men and women. I know in this instance, women have been affected mostly, especially in African and rural areas. And the fact that our program is not looking only at rural areas, we're looking at urban areas, we're looking at peri-urbans, and we're trying to look at solutions that will work for them. And as we say that our focus is on modern energy cooking, focusing on electricity, but we realize that we can't really have that model as the only option. But we have a multi-fuel option where we are targeting to use electricity, we're targeting biogas, and we're targeting bioethanol. And when you look at all these streams, they actually speak to different environments, like rural, maybe they can use biogas and biofuels. And also in peri-urban, they can use biofuels. And also in some areas where there's electricity, they can still use electricity as well. So when you look at these three multi-fuel kind of strategy, we are able to speak into different setups of environments. And then the other questions about men roles. I was talking about the Tanzania strategy for clean cooking. They really indicate that by 2026, they want to create awareness to about 10 million people. So it's not about creating awareness to segregated communities or gender or, they talk about 10 million people. So this is inclusive to youth, to women, and to men. So I feel that strategy is very critical, and we hope that if they really finance it to the latter, they should be able to achieve that.
Maybe let me also sound a little caution in terms of some cultural barriers that we have, because I know in my country, for example, we have this, if you want to barbecue, smoking food, people, the famous one is the tilapia. People don't want the ones with, they still want it to be smoked with
Traditional flavor.
yeah. Okay. So that is there. And then second thing is also this biogas. I've had people who said they are not going to eat anything that is good from biogas.
Yes.
So I just want to say that there are a few cultural barriers that we have to navigate.
True. And I might maybe respond to that and say that as MECS, we have done some studies, and we have tried to cook similar foods using EPC and the different types of stoves. And we have presented them to like people to sample and ask them how they test. We blindfolded them, and they could not. They could not tell the difference of the food, whether, because it tastes the same. So I think it's about improving, creating awareness and removing all those cultural stereotypes. Because when we did the test scientifically, they were confused. And in fact, the meal that they chose to be the best that tastes well was the EPC.
Is there like
Yeah.
a number to that study? Like how many
Yeah.
persons were sampled?
Yeah.
I don't have, but I can be able
Okay.
to share
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can add something here as well. So MECS also, when we work with the communities, we look at the traditional food and we start trying to do this testing with EPCs, using EPCs. And then we also were able to publish, and this was co-designed and published with communities. So we look at the traditional food, and we published e-cookbooks for different countries with the traditional food, and it was also published and translated into their different languages, so it can be accessible for everyone. And we do a lot of like when MECS presented any event or anything, we try to demonstrate the use of EPC. So you can find some, it doesn't have to be someone from MECS, but sometimes we have other partners that present and demonstrate the use of EPC. So it's kind of a training as well and engaging with communities. So we're trying to consider the cultural aspects.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in the finance aspect as well. It's because just speaking about the project you're talking about with the Tanzania government in terms of creating awareness to about 10 million people target. So even if they know, but the issue is, can they afford this? Because the truth is, even present day, those who can afford good, clean energy, electric cooking, they don't go for firewood. Like they don't use them in the houses. So it's for those who can't afford it. So, but they have to eat. So what do? They go to the bush, get wood, and then just cook their food. So I'm always very cautious about when we try to make policies and we don't see how it can actually be realistic. Because if you don't really know the situation of that person, then you don't understand. You're just giving them ideas, and they're like, this is like the white man's ideas. I'm looking back today. How do I get my children to eat and not die? You know what I mean? So how do you balance that finance part?
And just also the accessibility, like you said, I
Yes.
can just go to back of my house and get firewood.
Mhm.
Then you're telling me if I need to walk whatever miles or drive whatever miles to get, then why don't I just get it right?
You know, in India, when I was very confused when I went there many years ago, they were using cow dung. They use cow dung. Because they're piled everywhere. They just piled them on these patties. But yeah, you're right. The cows are there. Yeah, exactly. It's true. I hadn't thought that.
Accessibility also.
Yeah, I think that's financing models have come in the right way in terms of how they innovate and relate this to the different culture and context that we have in different countries. We cannot rule out that affordability is an issue. And that's why different organizations are actually packaging the different models to access financing for such technologies. Like for instance, I will give an example of ethanol, which is one of the technologies that is really picking up with Tanzania with the help of UNIDO. And then we have Kenya, where we have Cocoa Network, which is a private farm actually, trying to upscale the use of bioethanol and also trying to promote it locally in terms of production to create employment. So what is happening in there is that these technologies are relying on climate financing. And through that climate financing, we are saying, who will actually benefit the most? Should this financing go directly to the production of stuff, or should it go directly as subsidies of stores? So there is a catch-22 on how we need to package the product in terms of how climate financing is going to support access to affordable stuffs. So for instance, through subsidies now, through climate financing, we are seeing affordable stuffs. Like for instance, through this, both the Kenya National Cooking Strategy also demonstrates that with efficient or supportive policies, especially for financing, they will reduce the cost of stuff by 30 to 40%, which is very significant. And as I said, we cannot like rule out those still who will be affected, but there are different models. So climate financing through subsidies can really help to lower the prices. And we have seen studies showing that about 30 to 40% of stuffs, prices will reduce by 30 to 40%. That is very significant. And then we have other models to support access to these products. Like we have the pay-as-you-go models, where now the private sector will come in and provide the products, through installments. Like you can come in, give a deposit, and you pay through installments. So already with the 30 to 40% subsidized stuff, and then now with the pay-as-you-go models, we will really actually help improve affordability. I might not say we might rule out that to 100% in terms of affordability, but it does help. But I know also the government in these two countries is trying to provide, free stuff, distributing free stocks. I'm not saying that we should advocate for free stuff, free lunches. No, that's not what we advocate as economists, because there's nothing like free lunch. We need to empower the citizens. Like for instance, through other models, like through Tanzania, they are trying to encourage even the women to start producing, the fuel, and also through that, like producing the feedstocks that will actually generate bioethanol, for instance. So through that income generation, they'll be empowered to purchase some of these stocks as well, because the upfront cost, which is the stocks, which is the one that is a heavy burden to the society.
Yeah, I have one more to add about affordability. We were working with a company called Bidhasasa. It's in Kenya. And what do? They work with local communities. They distribute different household appliances, and EPCs is one of these cooking appliances. So what they do, they lend women, because some of the women in rural areas or poor areas, they don't have even a bank account. So what they do, they rely on the social network. They have a very strong social network in the rural communities. So they rely on this. So, and they lend women based on these social networks. So they have a lead for each group. And so Bidhasasa will, if you get approval from the lead that she knows this woman and she will be paying for the installments. And then they don't have to pay the upfront cost, which is really too much for rural women. So then they go to this. So they work with local communities, and this is what I wanted. Helen was talking about the higher level at the national level, but even with local communities, we've seen a lot of companies now working at this level, and they even provide support for women to have access to these EPCs without having the challenges of the upfront cost. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Apart from the financing issues, was there any disparity in the scale between the locals adopting the use of the EPC versus normal firewood cooking? I mean, like, how easy was it for them to operate and use? Was that a challenge or anything?
Okay, maybe I might not answer your question directly, but I can give an example of Ethiopia with the use of ethanol stoves, which I think is one of the stoves that can easily substitute firewood and charcoal, especially among the rural areas, and which is mainly referring to the context. So for that particular project, they decided to provide free stoves to the rural areas. You see, when you have free stoves, it makes sense. But over time, when they came back to the ground over 1 year, what they realized is that those who were given free stoves did not actually use it by the time they were coming back. They had another set of people who were given stoves, but it was subsidized. Like probably they paid 40%, and then 60% they paid for it. subsidy was 40% and 60%, they had to pay for it. So, but this group were trained on how to use the bioethanol. I mean, they were told the benefits of using bioethanol. They were educated on what they need to do about the bioethanol stocks. When they came back after 1 year, majority of these households were still using these stocks. So you can see the difference between subsidies and what it does, and the difference of information, like providing health information, providing environmental information, which is very key, and other information, economic information is very key. And even the technology information is very key in enhancing adoption, and not only adoption, sustained adoption.
Question, yeah?
How does access of electricity play out? I mean, you mentioned ethanol. I mean, in that case, you don't need access to electricity, I guess, but like broader clean cooking mechanism, I guess you do.
Yes.
So, like, do you choose like different technologies depending on the area? Are there ways to actually improve access to electricity at the same time?
Yes, we have off-grid plans. We have both on-grid and off-grid plans. What we see is that the connections are never safe, especially in Africa and Asia. They are usually unreliable. They're not stable, especially for electric cooking. So assuming you are cooking and then it trips, definitely you won't continue to cook with it, especially if you are baking, for instance. So what happens is that in different setups where there is unreliability of power or stability of power, we have new technologies that have come up. We have the solar powered stoves, the solar batteries, where now we can actually substitute those who have unreliable power to use solar powered technologies. There are a lot of them. And someone might be asking, I mean, they also need to be charged, yes. But what we have seen is that with the new technologies, the lithium batteries, what happens is that when you charge them, they can cook for 17 hours continuously. So that has been proven. So for those who say that, yes, we have challenges with electricity, so we can't cook using electricity, or we have unreliable and we don't have stable power, we can't use electricity. We have the solar powered battery lithium, which can actually support. And that has been proven.
Oh, sorry.
Just to ask a question. You did mention something there which I think was one of the lessons we learned from the era of sanitation and addressing sanitation in low and middle income countries, which is free toilet doesn't work.
Yeah.
People, because if it's filled, people will come and empty it, they are not willing to pay.
Yeah.
Subsidizing to an extent. And I think we need to move away from access. I think this is one thing I've been saying for a while, moving away from access to energy for consumptive use to access to energy for productive use. Because until people start seeing and connecting income generation to clean cooking, that is when you get that economic independence and empowerment. We saw one of the things that made mobile phones made massive inroads when it was introduced in Nigeria and a lot of countries is because people bought it, not because they can afford it, but because they can make money from it. You have small stores along the road where people will charge you for making a call. And that is a kind of model that can help accelerate clean cooking. If we are still at the level for consumptive use, that is why you go back, people are not using it. They go back because of the issues of accessibility and things like that. So I think, I don't know if it's something you're currently working on.
We are doing that.
But I think until we link that to wealth generation and income generation, I think we're still going to be grappling with widespread acceptance and adoption.
Could I add to that, Sarah, that I was just thinking about how just doing it in isolation, because I don't know what other aspects you work with, but if you just do it in isolation and then it doesn't lead to any more time available because of the issues of clean water and other, agricultural issues that are rising with the climate change that are making it harder to farm, then how do you see a change? If you've still got to spend so much extra time on those aspects and it doesn't free your time.
Maybe I can explain a bit in terms of the role of like the way you say, yes, the subsidies have consequences as well. But I can give an example of maybe the East African countries, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, what they're trying to do. They're trying to enhance accessibility of electric pressure cooker by, the model that you have said. You don't own an EPC, but you can actually go to the next store and actually boil your meat at a fee. So that model is already there, and you can actually access electric pressure cooker. And it costs very little, I think. It costs very little, less than, I think they were mentioning Kenya shillings of 10 Kenya shillings. And that is very little, very, very little. So it makes really economic sense to go to those points to actually boil your those hard meals like maize and beans, which is like the staple food, and also meat, which takes a lot of time. So they can actually do that, and it costs very cheap. And we have those activities happening in their neighborhoods. So productive use of this is happening, and then we are going beyond just like using, but also promoting training and maintenance among the youth as well. So we have projects like in Malawi, we already have projects where we are training the youth to assemble solar-powered, electric pressure cookers, where now they can be able to, people can be able to get their solar-powered checked. They can also get their EPC checked if it is broken, and it can be fixed. So in that way, we are actually not only looking at it in terms of, from the household perspective or from consumption perspective, be it from the institutions, but also looking at it from the whole value chain, where we can be able to produce, we can be able to use it and use it to create income, but also we are creating employment through repair, maintenance, and production as well. So it's a whole value chain that we're trying to support.
You mentioned sorry, go on.
Well, so what we've exclusively concentrated on cooking fuels, cooking stoves and all that, which is very good, because that's what we probably most people relate to. But I can tell you that my country, Ghana, you used to have an energy framework that was going to reach net carbon emissions in 2070. All of a sudden, they've cut it down to 2060. Okay, so more or less they've saved 10 years, because they claim they now have what they call energy transition investment plan. Okay, so they say.
So we've got one of those as well.
So all of a sudden, they are going to cut down from emissions from 2070 to 2060. Okay, and they are saying they are going to use six main avenues. Okay, one of them is the clean cooking stoves. It's just one component. But guess what? They also have battery electric vehicles in Ghana. You see, that's what they are calling for now. And the last time I checked, the vice president who is running to be president, he said they will be importing some electric vehicles into Ghana. Electric vehicles to Ghana.
Why the emphasis?
So why is that such a silly idea?
So I just want to give you that argument, because then that expands the discussions.
Okay.
They also want to use say electrification and renewables. And so that they are thinking of solar, wind, geothermal, and nuclear energy. Ghana, nuclear energy. Okay, and then of course low carbon hydrogen, green and blue hydrogen, they talk about that. The clean cool stoves, as you said. But I think one thing that is also key is this carbon capture and storage. Okay, that is very important, because we are talking about the sinks. And now, if you go to my country, the issue that is trending You know, that's the terminology they use now. It's what we call galamsey. I don't know if any of you know about the galamsey phenomenon. That's illegal mining. And where are people doing this illegal mining? They are going into forests, cutting down trees and doing the illegal mining. So where is the carbon storage? So these are other issues. And then there's, of course, what they talk about, the last one. It's bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, I think, which is related. Okay. And they claim that if they go business as usual, emissions are going to be, you know, 140 metric tons carbon equivalent. That then, if they do these changes, they can reduce it to 28 metric tons. I just wanted to throw this in, you know, and you're asking why am I making the emphasis? Yeah, because I'm making the emphasis. I'm thinking of electric cars in Ghana. They want to use it more for for passenger, what we call it, like public transport and things like that, not more individuals. And then, so for me, the key things are these electric vehicles, and then the carbon sinks. You know, because we are virtually destroying the sinks that we have in the country.
On the one hand, I agree, it does seem incongruous.
Yes.
The idea of people driving around Teslas in Ghana. But if you have a look at where the minerals come from, largely come from Africa. So,
Yeah, it does.
So why not have battery factories in Africa?
Well, and to
why
add to
not,
that,
you know,
in my country, we've now discovered what we can use to produce this lithium in my country. But yeah,
so
we discovered it.
I think regarding the EV and production of electric vehicles, I think one of the most important challenges that any country will face is the charging system.
Yes, you're right.
I did some research in the UK before I joined MECS on the electric vehicle charging systems in the UK, and they're actually facing a lot of challenges. And so this is another aspect that we need to consider: is the infrastructure ready for this transition or not yet?
So you see where my emphasis.
Yeah, I to be fair, I actually know where you're coming from, because it's always a key thing that we always miss out, which is corruption. That's where everything ends for Africa in terms of. It's good to say, oh, you want to do this, you've had the meetings, you're adopting these technologies on paper. But what are the strategies that have been put in place to ensure that you have that smooth transition? For example, right now in Nigeria, also a very big issue, because somehow we had a very funny guy who claims he is the president, but we didn't vote for him. So, and he has taken us back 10 years, 20 years in terms of economic. So basically last year, just 1 year in government, by the way, last year, Naira to pound was about 550, 600. Today is 2,250 Naira to 1 pound. And what that does is it kills businesses, people are suffering, and we are heavily reliant on fuel cars, right? But people can't afford fuel anymore, because we that own the fuel, own the crude oil, we have to buy fuel for 1,200 Naira per liter. And the what's it called now? The monthly salary, the basic salary, it's about minimum wage, yeah. Thank you. It's about 70,000 Naira. So how do you buy fuel for 1, 2, and you'll be able to train your kids? So a lot of people are now becoming, those who were middle class before, suddenly find themselves in the bottom class all of a sudden. And what are they doing? The government came up without thinking and says, oh, you know what? We're going to go for CNG powered cars. So you're going to convert your cars from electric engine to CNG without anybody regulating it. So what do we have now? It's funny, but it's not funny, because people are blowing up. So you're driving and the car just poof, because so it's like, so that's why I said, why do you say I can relate? It's something that is sad, because you have the brilliant minds who are well educated, well skilled in these areas, but the government would set up the appropriate, department to say, okay, how do we, if actually want to transition, what should we do? How do we make sure the tanks are safe? Who does the transitioning? How do we make sure that people's lives are safe when they go for these cars? They just wake up and they adopt something just because on paper we are doing this, but there is really no strategies in place to make sure that you really get the good results you're going for. So that's basically, I think that's why it's saying nuclear power plant, because it's good on paper, but how do we get it done?
Yeah, I think good governance is a big issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Across many different countries, including the UK.
Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment. Sam, I understand why you were smiling when they are talking about electric cars. I mean, I'm from South Africa, we had these massive power outages, but on the continent, I think that only 10% of individuals have access to the electricity grid. I mean, for those two women in the corner would know more about the statistics than I do. And which means that there are millions of people that don't have electricity. So if we are talking about electric cars, I mean, it's a comma percentage of the population. And then also, if we look at the issue of transport and it's gendered. And on the African continent, as we know, the majority of women's transport are their legs. They walk. They walk long distances for water. They walk long distance for healthcare. Of course, I mean, it's different if you, in terms of your class and rural versus urban. But I think we need to also be realistic in terms of how do we intervene in terms of the majority of the people, and of course, given that you raised the issue of gender, it's of course poverty is gender. There's the feminization of poverty, as we know. So I don't think, Sam, that Elon Musk hopefully will the country, but that he would at any time be charging anything.
Electric vehicles, the funny thing is, they plug into the grid, don't they?
So in South Africa, you could probably buy an electric vehicle. I mean, there's the crosses and all of that. But I mean, it's 1% of the population. And also, if we don't have we were joking recently, we said, if you have an electric car, it's fine, you can have a charger to charge it at the various spaces. But if we don't have electricity, and I also think maybe on a more serious note, the issue of women and transport in Africa, when we had a project a few years, end of last year, we oversaw the project, and there was this really innovative project where women built bicycles for other women, and women got driver's licenses in terms of the issue of transport. But I understand we're talking about the issue of energy, and in South Africa, I mean, there's wind farms and all of that, but we're also going back to certain forms of energy that you might see as broadly politically incorrect, but it is speaking to the context that we are engaging with.
Go on.
I can still build up on the transport issue and address the aspect of an inclusive transport system from the aspect of like having a model where a transport model where we were looking at the mass rapid transit system in Kenya. And what happened is that the initial plan, like the 2030 plan for Kenya, was to have these massive high-speed, roads, and cars could move fast. And then they realized, oh my goodness, we really also need to think about the energy and the emissions. So they thought they had built that already with financing from China. And then later they realized that, okay, we need to think about the energy and then how then do we change this model into a bus rapid transit system where now we can move more people, women, more people, affordable, and integrate it with these big roads, high-speed roads. So what happens is that they got another extra financing to try to have an intermodal between the high-speed road and have the rapid transit system, such that buses, which are EVs, could stop in the middle of these high-speed roads so that they can free passengers from. I mean, it was very crazy on the design because they had some weighing bridge where passengers will actually come and board the vehicles and then also, depart from the same model. But this couldn't work because the initial design wasn't created for high speed and to support mass transit system as well as the EV at the same time. So I would say, yes, sometimes the political environment is kind of, addressing the needs of the society, but without adequate planning, visualized planning, and then we cannot be able to address all these things at the same time. So we need to have people who can actually think about these things in a wholly designed way.
Maybe I could add something here about at MECS, we use a holistic approach. So, we look at, it's a kind of a system approach. So this is what guides our, research teams and all our, activities, actions, research, our support to other countries. So what we did at MECS, we have like a JEXU. A JEXU has three dimensions is the policy enabling environment, consumer awareness, and the third one is the value chain. And so under each of these domains, we have sub-domains, which are looking at the subsystems actually, and then we have different research themes, and we all consider all these, the whole system and the subsystems. And you cannot approach any of these. It's like it's a JEXU. So and people, when you are doing a JEXU, a real one, people do it in different ways. You can start with the corners, all the corners. You can start from the middle. It depends. So the nice thing about the JEXU is that we can approach it from different ways, and we can work on all the subsystems. So we have at MECS, you have a finance team. We have someone like me working on the gender framework, others working on different, we have on the humanitarian, and Helen, you're more with economics, is that right? And other bioenergy fuels. So we look at the electricity. You talked about the electricity. What we're trying now, we know that electricity access in many countries in Africa and in Asia, or low-income countries access is not that high, right? So what we are proposing here, we want to work with governments to start integrating and considering clean cooking or electric cooking into the planning of the energy and electrification strategies. So when you start in the beginning, it helps better than you wait until these infrastructure is built without considering the clean cooking. And we've seen a lot of countries having very good high access to electricity, maybe 90 and 90%. We're talking about 90%, but still they are cooking with firewood. So this is what we're trying to work on. Okay, we know that there is many countries don't have access to electricity, but still we need to get this into the discussion and include it into the NDCs, National Determined contributions. So we make sure that clean cooking is integrated. And so we're not with MECS, we are working on all these subsystems and trying to develop them. We support countries on all of these, and actually we like every now and then we have these JECs. So this is how we assess countries. And we look at these subsystems every year, what has been developed, what has been changed, because you put a strategy or you put a target for a country, and then you find out that things are changing really rapidly, more than what we've expected. So you have to keep monitoring and assessing. It's an ongoing approach from MECS, and we do this at the program. Yeah, so I just wanted to share our approach towards accelerating modern energy.
Okay, can I just
Paula
say
first.
something?
Paula before me.
Okay, go on.
There's a
I
question
want
here
to-
that has.
Oh.
Yeah.
Three questions.
It follows up on the systems thing. In the work that we've been doing with the nutrition and trying to respond to the climate change as well, the systems approach is also the most effective one. If you do this in the system, what does it do? And particularly, we talked earlier about gender. Some of the early things we did were naive to the gender dynamics, and now we look in the system and think about, well, if the women are changing what they're growing, how do the men respond to this? Because in one of the projects, the women changed what they were growing. It was doing well, and then the men realized that actually you can make money from what they're growing now, and then all the food was going off to be sold. So now we talk about the mix of the foods and what food is good for the household and what food is good for making money, because both are important, right? The households need money to survive, but they also need food to create good nutrition. So the systems
Linear approaches will not work anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's first and then second, and is there a third at the back? Sorry.
Sometimes if I want to make myself laugh, I read the renewable energy policies of countries and I laugh because they are so ambitious, like Sam has just listed nuclear in Africa, like seriously. And it makes one laugh, and that's perhaps what you sense from what Sam is trying to say, is because besides the infrastructural deficit, besides the economic constraints, besides the political barriers and the fragmented market, there are some things that are really, really fundamental based on the things we've probably seen in Sam's presentation this morning that were not factored in when some of these technologies are being designed in the West. Dust, extreme heat, dust. One of the things, solar panel came and then we now realize, oh, it's dusty. What do we do? It's impacting the efficiency. This is what you get. It's not snowing in Africa. It's you have some of these different climatic conditions that could make people think twice. Why would I want to invest this huge amount of money in an electric vehicle when there is let's just pack aside the economic constraints and things like that. And the reason why I'm pointing to this is, and I think also it's also important to stress that there is a skill gap. If you're bringing a very, very sophisticated technology to Africa, and you don't have the spare parts, there's still large dependence on the West for spare parts and things like that, it's not going to be adopted. And I think this is where we are struggling. I always say that the mental mapping of producers or designers in the West and the users, they are East and West, they are not going in the right direction. And I guess this is the lesson that if we want to facilitate, if we want to make inroads in terms of technological transfer and adoption, we need to start with the users. We need to start, I think that was what Sam and myself and Cheryl was talking about yesterday. Do people really need electric vehicles? Do they want it? Okay, if they do, what are the conditions? What are the things that we can do to be able to facilitate adoption? If you factor in extreme heat, if you factor in, I'm not even talking about the infrastructural deficit, because if you've been on a lot of African roads, you know that, all I shaking her head, you know that we are far off from electric vehicles. If you're, even filling stations are scarce, let alone having some of this. I think we need to start thinking anything, and that I guess applies to us as researchers. If you want to do something that want to make a lot of inroads, and I guess that's why Paula has been able to make a lot of success in their work, it's starting with the users. What do they want? What is the context? I want to believe that while the resources are mined from Africa to develop this electric vehicle, I'm not sure if Elon Musk considered dust. I'm not sure if he considered extreme heat, and this have impact on all these very, very sophisticated and expensive technologies.
I mean, I wanted to make a bit of a counterpoint to this. I mean, I'm not an expert on these issues at all, so maybe what I'm going to say it doesn't make much sense, but I think there's this idea that it's going to be more difficult to adopt certain technologies in Africa, like in low, middle and low income countries in general than in Europe, but I'm not completely persuaded about it. I mean, I come from Italy. I mean, the idea of like installing like the necessary infrastructure for electric cars in Italy, it's like daunting because I mean, we have cities that have been built in the Middle Age. There's no space. Most people live in flats. They don't even know where they're going to park their car. They have to look for on-street parking. I mean, I've lived in South Africa, and I remember like the middle class neighborhoods are built for cars. There's parking everywhere. You have drives. You have like you have like parking in the buildings. So in a sense, it's going to be easier to put like chargers for electric cars there than it's in Italy, for instance.
What about South Africa?
Yeah, South Africa, of course. But yeah, but
Africa is not Africa.
I once lived in Ivory Coast, which I think is quite similar to Ghana in many respects. So I have another. But actually, I wanted to like make a small provocation, like coming from what you were saying about electric cars, because we talked a lot about the poorest people in society. But I mean, in countries like Ghana, Ivory Coast, and Nigeria, there's also people who are rich. And at the moment, like the ideal of those rich people is like having the most like polluting life as possible. I mean, I might be exaggerating and joking a bit, but like they were driving SUVs. They like to put their air conditioner at like 16 degrees. So maybe like changing also the attitudes of those people could be interesting. Like if they start to buy Tesla, then they would want to have electric chargers, for instance. And maybe the other people can use those electric chargers as well.
So there's a question at the back and then there's a question in the middle, yeah?
I wanted to make a comment about the issue of temperature with electric cars, because they don't work very well if the temperature is very low, but they also don't work well when the temperature is very high. And yeah, this is an issue, for example, like in a place like Ghana, where temperatures can go very easily above 49 Celsius degrees, and electric cars not really charge in that situation. And the second point I wanted to discuss is about street food economy. There was like in 2022 an article from FAO, from the Agriculture Organization, that was stating that actually we have to learn a big lesson from Asia, that has like a huge economy around street food, and you think it may be an issue also of discussion in Africa, like this street food promotion and this green economy, this green of clean cooking, like brought inside the street food, because it's very, to make it more accessible, more green, and to make also people save time. And so, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So let's take the final question first.
It's not a question.
Oh, it's not what comment?
It's a comment about many things. So.
Well, we're definitely going to come back to it then.
Vehicles and the difference in the climate from the weather in Africa or Asia and other countries. So I don't know more about this topic, but what I can say that I lived in the Gulf countries for 4 years, and I remember that cars were designed to for this hot, in the Gulf countries, the temperature is really very high. So the cars were designed differently from other cars designed. And then when we moved to the UK, I am originally from Egypt. When I moved to the UK, I found that cars are designed in different way, like heating and, to be more suitable to the weather, right? And even you can heat the seat. So these options are not available in Gulf countries. So I assume that electric vehicles will be designed differently for So this is my comment, my response to the first question. The second question you asked about the food vendors,
food
or street
economy.
food, yeah. Okay, so I can answer part of this question. We do a lot of work, I think in India, right? Yeah, but we're also working on school with the WFP on school food programs. And so we have different, themes also and contexts that we work on. Schools are institutional, it comes under the institutional cooking. And we work with WFP. We started to test the introduction of electric pressure cookers, large electric pressure cookers in schools. And so this also might work for street food. And I don't know if you know more about the India thing or.
Maybe I can just say maybe an example, because what they're trying to do, sometimes we have the community practice. We have a WhatsApp group of community of practice where we have experts, people from different countries, talking about technologies, talking about policy, talking about, the business side of electric cooking. So sometimes they put ideas, like for instance, when we talk about street cooking, like sometimes Asians like corn, the street corn, yeah. So they like it burned, so they were asking, can we have they use charcoal to do this? So or coal. So how can we they were asking, how can they promote it in terms of electric cooking? Do we have a machine that can actually cook corn, the street corn, the way they like it, and then reduce the levels of emission and also reduce the wastage of charcoal and firewood and etc. So yes, there are technologies coming up, and we as you said, we are really looking at supporting the cultural setup in terms of whether they are rural or urban or peri-urban. So for instance, that is kind of commercial cooking. We look at it as commercial cooking because there is commercial and also there is institutional cooking. So institutional cooking, yes, it's about institutions themselves, but there's also commercial cooking where we have restaurants, we have all these things like street food. So we have such research going on at the moment in Nepal, in Asia, in Bangladesh as well.
Institutional, commercial?
Yes.
Yeah, institutional and commercial, yeah. So schools is under institutional, schools and hospitals?
Yes,
yeah.
And prisons as well.
Prisons, yeah.
All right, one last question, I guess. All right,
We've got 45 minutes still.
All right.
For himself. For himself, I think.
All right, maybe on this topic, but wait, let's see. All right, so from the local side of things, let's assume I'm the lady and I'm cooking, and I sell firewood to other people. Introducing electric cookers is going to put someone out of business. How do you intend to cover that gap?
Okay, so one of the things also that we're looking at is, okay, if a business we get out and there is another opportunity, how can we get women, provide training? So we're creating new job opportunities, providing training skills, providing like for the maintenance and repairs. We're trying to ensure that women and men are included in these training sessions. We're trying to include women in having more access to finance so they can invest in this sector. So, okay, if they are collecting fuel, but you're trying to provide new opportunities now and train women to be included in this transition, right? So this happens with all technologies now, and things are really changing rapidly. So something will go out, will phase out, and something else will be a new opportunity. The idea is how people will cope with this change. So as a program, we try to engage with end users, but also there is a responsibility for end users to have the ability to change and cope with this change, because it will affect us all. It will affect all investors. It will affect all businesses. So we have to cope and be flexible with all these changes that are happening around us. So I think it's the responsibility of the women working, who used to collect fuel now to find other ways. And if there is an opportunity that they can get engaged, and we provide all the support to do it as a investor, we provide all the support, the technical training, the access to finance so they can start investing in such projects. Maybe this will help in addressing this kind of challenge.
Just to add, how do you get the statistics though? Like, if you go to a country, you can easily assess the government and maybe the top sellers of this. Or how do you know which person in what village, is actually that you've just put out of business, and how can they key into that? Because don't forget, some of them don't have access. They don't even know that this kind of programs are even going on in the first place. All they notice is that, oh, I used to get my firewood or something at a cheaper price. Now they said it's scarce, so it's getting more expensive. So how do you really get the real-time data to say, okay, these are the people who want to reach out, and then maybe place by place sensitization? How do you get that incorporated?
So we have a lot of projects, but we cannot do all the work. We cannot collect all this data through the program. We need a lot of other organizations working with us. So we work with, at the global level, we work with the national statistics. We try to include, this is the kind of support that when you go to any, a conference or a global event, maybe you start to highlight these challenges on the lack of data. So you're looking at the national and global level, and also you're working with the local communities. We support a lot of projects, and we fund a lot of actually research to start collecting this data. Now we have the last month, we had different polls to start collecting. It's mainly to start collecting data on, for example, informal settlements. We need to understand more about informal settlements, their access to electricity, know more about the potential of electric cooking. And what we need to look at, the blackouts. How do they access electricity? Is it illegal, or they are connected to the grid, or they have any other sources? So we start to work on the local level as well. And as I mentioned, at the national level, what kind of indicators that we can start collecting. For the gender framework that we developed, this was a kind, of course, you cannot include a lot of indicators when it comes to the national level, but you can use this framework to start collecting data at the local level. And of course, when you look at the gender indicators, it's completely different from the emissions. By emissions, it's a calculation. You can use an equation, collect the data by 1 or 2. You can use even sensors to measure the emissions. But when it comes to measuring the gender impacts, it's very difficult. So what we try to do is to develop these indicators and develop survey questions, design survey questions, so we can start collecting this data. Now we are in the phase of trying to find projects that are interested in measuring the gender impact and assessing the projects as well. So we're going to start working with them and collecting data on gender. Maybe this work will later on be, developed more. Maybe we can try to narrow down these indicators and try to include some of them at the national level. So yeah, I think hopefully this has.
If I can just add one point to that, I would say that the initiative of collecting data is not left to one body, and in many countries that we work with, we have the community practice, and community practice is very localized, as you see the word community practice. And then also beyond the community practice, we have a platform where, like in Ministry of Energy, they have the energy centers, which are also happening in different places. Yeah. So within these energy centers, because there are some which are like in the rural areas where it's coordinated by the ministry as well, which is government, this information can be passed through. And then we also had areas where we are championing like electric pressure cookers in terms of showing demonstration of how it works. So we had identified like some areas in different countries where they can actually be like exhibition or demonstration centers where people can actually learn and see how this is working. So it's kind of not left to one individual, maybe government or us, but it's something that is worked within the community.
Yeah.
Everyone on Ted Slade's comment, by the way.
Yeah.
Don't forget her comment.
No.
If you are looking for the African data on energy, Africa is the African Union Commission for Energy Commission. They started data that is available for Africa, and I attended a number of webinars. So they are doing different things. So one of the things, they are developing frameworks to improve the quality of data at the national level, and which includes a lot of data at the local level as well. So maybe this could be
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to have, but I want to touch on two issues in the discussions as well.
Yeah.
But I'm really eager to hear.
Yeah, you can make
Comments. Okay, so let's have, if we hear comments.
Yeah, so I am coming from the very technical side, more on the innovation side. However, in most projects, we are now faced with the question like, for example, if you suggest a synthetic fuel, I'm imagining that your ethanol is coming from. There's always this ethical dilemma that food and energy, and in the communities where you're trying to promote this, there is definitely a food crisis.
Yeah.
Then you can't, I think somebody mentioned something about, you have some crops that seem, if they might have been food crops at one point, but then they suddenly have a commercial value. And then there's a dilemma, should we make more money, should we feed ourselves in these families? And most of those families don't really have large pieces of land that they can really manage to feed themselves and also have a very big income. So that's one ethical dilemma. Then for me, the other ethical dilemma I see is promoting electrical pressure cookers. I'm really wondering which setting this is, because if it's the rural area, you can forget it. If there is no, at least a household, it has to be paired with, let's say, a solar.
That's what they mentioned.
Solar
They mentioned.
and the cooker. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And then I think when I came in, you were talking about the medical system and the vaccines, and I was just remembering some anecdotes I've had of yes, there's been a grant, there's been a solar powered fridge given to the hospital with the vaccine place, and guess what? Because of the poor pay of the health workers and so on, what's in the fridge is not the vaccines, but business opportunity. So they're selling sodas and charging phones and such things. So I think sometimes we come up with, we are like the governments, really. We are like the governments, we come up with solutions, but sometimes we don't really think about the actual situation on the ground. And so then in the end, what happens is the project is not successful, and then it's just left there, and it's really a big waste of time. And it could have been with a little bit of thinking out, even leave alone blaming the government, even we ourselves who are implementing these projects or proposing them and trying to get the grants for them. We should think how practical are these things? Have we thought of everything? And what's really the success? Oh, what are the implications of this idea on the community? So this is some of the points.
Maybe I can address
I
the first
forgot.
one.
Yeah, if you got any more comments.
I can address the first one. I'm actually handling bioethanol in the program, and what you get to see is that there are different generations of bioethanol.
Yes.
There's the first to the fourth, right? And the first one is like more of the issue where we have food versus energy debate. Yeah, things to do with land issues and also things to do with now, should we use land for food? Should we use land for energy? And then food, should we use food for energy or should we use food to eat? So those questions are really very deep integrated into ethics. And as MECS, we have positioned ourselves to actually focus on the second generation or at the other third and fourth. And I think the fourth generation is very difficult as of now, given the technology, the investments that is needed. It's very huge. So we are thinking that second generation makes sense. And maybe I can explain the first generation. First generation of ethanol mainly looks at, using cassava, using sugarcane directly as crops, as energy, which is an issue, assuming those families don't have enough to eat. So we look at the second generation, where the second generation looks at how then should we use agricultural waste to actually support the ethanol generation. So we are talking about issues to do with molasses, things to do with molasses and what else? I've forgotten, but mainly through waste, mainly through waste like sugar waste, and any other agricultural waste. That is what we use actually to now generate bioethanol. And that makes sense because now those who don't have food can have, and through that system, we can sustain the environment, trying to use the waste from agriculture to produce energy for use. And we are saying it's still a new technology, but it's something that we can tap because it's already existing and trying to use the resources that we have because the feedstocks are coming from agricultural resources. When you go to the third generation, it becomes something else. It becomes things that we need a lot of technology, things that we will instead now be investing to second generation, we are actually denying second generation investments to third generation, which makes sense. The fourth generation looks at even carbon capture, how do we actually generate ethanol and also at the same time encourage carbon capture. So it's all in a different level, and even to the fourth generation, it requires a lot of investments, a lot of skills, a lot of everything into that. So our position is as MECS, is to look at the second generation, which makes sense and addresses all these issues. I've spoken to different stakeholders in this sector, and they're usually saying, okay, we want to still do first generation because already they have put their business on the ground. And their essence is that we can actually intensify agriculture and have more yields so that we can have more yields for food and more yields for food. But is this still ethics? Question mark. So, and then now we are saying, okay, it's not ethics. Then do we have enough financing investments, all these resources that is required to move us from first generation to second, third, and fourth generation? So it's a whole issue about ethics, whole issues about integrating planning and financing and etc. So it's not an easy task, but we will get there in time.
I remember we were discussing bioethanol once, and I was talking about the water consumption in agriculture.
Yeah.
So this is another
challenge. Generation.
Yeah. This is another.
Yeah, water's a massive problem.
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah.
And regarding the solar power, so we funded a lot of projects for to start testing whether electric cooking can work off grid. And so we have a lot of projects for the off-grid connected to solar powers in rural areas and mini grids as well. We funded a lot of projects to do this research in this area, and I think the evidence came from the research that it works. But of course, in rural areas and these informal settlements, I think in humanitarian displacements, which are located in remote areas, far away from the national grid and mostly not connected. And we also tested the WFP in some projects. They are all pilot projects as connecting these large electric pressure cookers to a solar system. But the optimum actually is to get these systems integrated into the energy planning for schools, like integrating to the whole uses of electricity in schools. So you don't do the electric cooking alone, and then you do electricity access for educational purposes. If it's integrated into the school energy planning, it would have been better. But anyway, for any other displacement settlements, informal or any other place which is off-grid, still we have a lot of projects and pilot projects that proved that it works and it can provide access for the EPCs.
Maybe I can just mention about the lithium batteries, because that is what has been proved by our research, because we can see that when it's fully charged, you can actually cook for 17 hours. But the question is, how many can afford that battery lithium? How many can afford? So I know with solar, the prices were high, maybe in 2010, but prices are actually dropping. But with time, we will get to see lithium batteries going down in terms of prices.
Can I just add one last thing on lithium batteries and electric vehicles? Obviously, the stuff we do around data that I was boring people with in that other room is that what's the end goal here? Because I'm quite honestly, I go to a lot of these sustainability things, and we've got 2030, 2035, 2050 are the targets. We're not going to reach any of these. There's no collective thinking. When I sit in the middle of it, and quite honestly, I mean, I'm not academic in any sort of way, but I do realise as a salesperson, you start with the end in mind. What's the end goal here? The end goal is to do that. Sounds there's a lot of people who are a bit confused about certain ways how technologies are built in the first place. It's like, I don't like red lights being on and stuff. You know, a microwave left on for a year without cooking costs you £54. It's called a vampire device, right? That shouldn't be on a wide screen. I realise that. That's zapping energy in this room right now. So everything you're doing in Africa with these people with a little pressure cooker, this room's messed that up already. So it's almost a case of, I'm getting a bit weirded out, because if the end is we're all going to die horribly, and you know, the UK, they would say, oh, we're only responsible for 1% of global emissions. That's like saying I'm only weeing on my side of the swimming pool. I'm only smoking on my side of the bus, right? You idiots! It's one planet, isn't it? Right. So we know that China, we know that America, we know that India are massively far more polluting countries than these other countries. But it seems to me, you guys, and I've been to some of their conferences, you guys are putting a lot more pressure on yourselves and the people of Africa. We should be putting pressure onto these other people. Elon Musk, where did he make all his money? Why is he the richest man in the world? Because he promised electric vehicles. But then to create the battery is far more polluting than the vehicle can ever do. I like electric vehicles because they don't do direct pollution into the air. That's the only benefit. Otherwise, they're heavy, they create potholes. As you said, you can't drive to Scotland about them, there aren't enough charging places. So we wasted 20, 25 years listening to people that really were telling us a load of rubbish, right? And so this is where I get freaked out. I don't think we're going to get anywhere, personally. I think we need, and you said about the jigsaw, where's the collective thinking? You know, it's so I mean, forgive me for having to point a lot of this out, but I think that I come to these climate summits and I come to these climate talks, and I am hoping that basically we're collectively going to point the finger at the person who's doing the most, because it's not us. I can tell you that much. It's not the people in this room. So hopefully in these countries, like you say, you know, with the corruption and all that kind of stuff, because people, we're not squirrels. We don't collect nuts for the future. We are nuts right now. That's the problem. That's the problem with the human race. So, but I do love all these conversations. I don't know why I had this little rant, to say the truth. I just felt like I needed to. But anyway, that was my talking point anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what I wanted to say that relates to what he's saying. But first of all, let me mention the issue also of population growth. You know, because in my countries, the population growth, you know, attributed to rising ownership of cars and the transportation system is one of the ways that we make emissions go down. But it looks as if nobody talks about it anymore. Anytime we demographers want to talk about population growth, it's as if you are also talking about population control. Okay, but that's not what it is. Thankfully, fertility rates have gone down in Africa quite drastically. We used to be operating around, in my country, around 7, 8 per woman. Now it's moving around 3, 4. Okay, but still not up to replacement level fertility. And so we still need to be having those discussions. But as he said, if you look at other countries, you know, with all these massive populations. So I just wanted to mention that it's a factor in the discussions we are having.
You know that, sorry, can I say something? That personal carbon footprint, an American's carbon footprint of a personal American is what, 20 tons of CO2? An Indian and African, whatever, it's like 8 tons of CO2. And what does that look like? And do you know how much it is to produce a ton of CO2? it's £49,000. Right, so basically, when you have these figures flying around, tons of this, tons of that, it's all going to be produced, and we pay for it through our taxes or things like that. So personal responsibility is one thing, but I think it's the biggest scam ever. But there's no personal carbon footprint. We're only using renewables. We're not using renewables because we haven't made the renewables. We haven't used fossil fuels because we want to get our cars where we can be, because we have to rely on these other people. So the fact is, yeah, you know what, and I thought that was a big factor within your talk, was about, you know, this personal side and what we can do. Population numbers and all that kind of stuff. Industrial revolution, we can see from then in 100 years what one country did, you know, to the planet. So trying to think we can reverse all that is very, very strange. But yeah.
But the fact is, we need to have discussions around.
Oh no,
that.
of course we do. Of course we do.
And then the second issue I wanted to mention is, you know, when some of the in the global south, when these discussions started, we were pushing for adaptation. Okay, so we were pointing fingers at those who caused the problem, and then making a case that we should find a way of, you know, helping out.
Retribution,
okay,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. I have not heard any of that at all here. It's mostly the discussions have been on mitigation. So I just wanted to point these two issues out, and where is that discussion? Those of you who are going to pop, I don't know. Where have we ended up with?
Well, it's 17 trillion, isn't it? 17 trillion now. What they're saying. This country can't make
and lots of damage.
Oh yeah, well, let's pay it back.
Loss and damage, I believe, will be quite a big issue at the forthcoming COP. But there's a long way to go, isn't there? I think. Any more?
No, I just want, like, talking about even just when you go to the policy making and all of that. I think from a moving forward or achieving something point of view, I think it's time that in this kind of meetings, and even on the bigger scale, most especially on the bigger scales, like terms of the UN, you know, and Commonwealth discussions, we need to start calling out real time, real specific challenges in Africa. Call out the leaders is what I'm saying. So you want to have, for example, electric cars or hydrogen powered cars, which is better compared to the fossil fuel cars, but we know that they're infrastructure deficits. So don't just say, oh, we want you to do this. Say in Nigeria, for example, 60% to 80% of your roads are terrible. President this or minister this. What are you doing to try to fix this issue so that more of your people can be open to have more industry set up, you know, and then you can have more adaptation of this new, you know, technologies that you're offering or you're trying to suggest. Because at the end of the day, I like to, because one of the things we learn as responsible innovators when you're in the lab and trying to create technology is, how is this my technology going to be used? If I make, right now I'm working on waste to hydrogen. So if I take that and I go to Nigeria and I want to set up, for example, a plant that will take this waste and, you know, generate power. I don't want someone coming to me to say, pay me this amount of money to just even allow you set it up. Do you understand what I mean? So if I think about how much you're billing me, I'd rather just, you know what, forget it, and I leave. You know, because I experienced that firsthand. I was trained in South Korea in solar panels making, so I make panels, I make batteries and all of that. But you get to Nigeria and in fact, you're coming to somebody's telling you, pay me maybe £100 just for even parking your vehicle to come say you're coming to work here. Someone is charging you £1,000 to allow your file go to the minister or go to the commissioner. So these are real-time issues that is happening, and it doesn't just affect us. In fact, for us, we're kind of like, we know that's what's going on. We are like, you know, but for the white people and Asians and other investors coming in, they come in and they meet a shocker and then they run. In the past 1 year, over 10 big 500 companies, global 500 companies have left Nigeria. Talking about GlaxoSmithKline. So these are big companies. They've left Nigeria because it became so unbearable that they were not even making profit. We're not talking about profit, they couldn't even float anymore. They had to pack up. And what does that do? More people have been plunged into unemployment, more poverty. And it's a very big issue. So I think the West and others in the conversation, when we go for these meetings, call out the governments, call them out to their faces, because they don't, healthcare, you're talking about healthcare, for instance, they don't build the hospitals there. But they go on vacation to different, they go to UK, they go to Paris, and they get the best facilities. So you tell them, if you don't fix your hospital, we're not allowing you come to our hospitals. So by the time we begin to call them out on what they do, then they have no other option than to start fixing these issues and start actually making these things work. Then it's easier for you to tell someone that, okay, come and work on this, because now I know I'm not thinking about, I'm going to die of hunger or I don't have access to healthcare. I'm thinking my brain can actually sit down and say, you know what, I can actually build this and it's possible. But most people now are just thinking of how do I survive? And when you're in that survival mode, you're not thinking of how you want to save the planet. Planet is the least of your issues. So I think we have to begin to call out these real issues and call the people responsible for
Well,
them.
that's where, the food starts, because what's the biggest carbon emitter in the world? We know that is through agriculture. We know it's through, I'm a Sikh, we don't eat cows. We should have been eating the cow, shouldn't we, by the sounds of it? But yeah, because the cows are causing all the stuff. So there are the big ones, you've got the big problems, and you've got the smaller ones. I love what you're doing about food. What you were doing with regards to how the people are living in this, what we do here has an effect on somebody over there, which is so unfortunate. And I feel really bad for that. I don't think it's not them. They're not the ones who are causing, because as you said, you're not the ones actually causing the problem in the first place. I think we do need to take a lot of responsibility. Education as well. It's shocking. Most kids, they think they know about carbon. They don't know how electricity is even generated. You've got a road here, there was a little road called Faraday, right? Most people don't know Michael Faraday. So the point is, if we're not even educating people at this point of how electricity is made and how you use it, because you know me, I'm all about data and digital and stuff, and I'm already on about how TikTok, 1 hour of surfing, that guy on the phone, and that's 30 meters in a car every hour that you're sat there doing whatever you're doing. The point is that there are big emitters out there and there are big problems, but I would love to get involved in education, but I love to, it made me feel better knowing that you guys are around, because especially your work, no, honestly, it is work. When you showed about that woman who was in the kitchen at 40 degrees, we had 40 degrees here one day. Remember that one day? Yeah, we almost died. It was like, what the
heck? On the beach.
It affects your productivity.
Could we go?
It has gone from having 50 degrees like a couple of days a year to having it for 1 month, and it's like,
it's unbearable.
Could we go back to the governance issue? Because I think you make a really important point that it's about holding governments to account and transparency. What are the prospects for that?
Can I say a few things as a politics person? I think the problem is that we don't have a clear recipe for that. It's even more difficult than many of the other things that people have mentioned. Anti-corruption campaigns don't seem to work very well. If someone knows about a successful example, I'm open to change my mind. But democracy was 20-30 years ago, people were thinking that democracy was going to be the panacea. Some people still think about it, but it's not really.
This climate thing, can I just say that I've been lobbying to government for 4 years now to put digital as part of the polluter, because 83% of businesses identify as completely solely online, but it's not part of net zero. Not even this university has to put their scope 3 indexes, they don't have to put their website emissions on there. Which for me is ridiculous, because there's a company called Next in Leicester, and I did a report for them. 5,000 tons of CO2 was released through their website, which is not part of their climate thing. So when I look at it, I'm very sceptical, because I'm going, you're counting light bulbs, as I was telling you, the clothes, the this, the that. So the fact is, there is an agenda here, and we just let Amazon spend £19 billion worth of investment to put new data centers in. One data center uses 1.7 trillion litres of water in a year. They can't build in London, they can't build new housing around data centers because there's not enough energy left in the infrastructure and stuff like that. So I looked at this, but 7 years ago, I was doing multiple languages. I tried to get sign language as part of the thing. So I'm one of the media companies that actually does 54 different languages, sign language. But I get blocked at every turn. They will not allow it. The fire service will not allow me to put out fire advice in all these different languages. So you've got to ask yourself, well, I say solve it out myself anyway. I've been like saying, I just do it, we do it ourselves. But there is a big issue here with regards to what we're being told to do and what the other person is doing. And it's disgusting to start with. But I also agree, if you believe in not littering and you're not picking up the litter in front of your own feet, don't talk about littering. You can't solve the war in your own house while you're about wars over somewhere else. So, but yeah, so so what does a university like Loughborough do? Because they are really at the top of sustainability. Well, no, it's seriously. You
Put you on
have
the
such a
spot
voice.
right there.
You have such a voice. But you do have a voice, don't you? I mean, as a
Well, as a university, we
you're a great university, by the way. Which I did DMU, but
so our performance as a university is patchy, to be honest. We do some very good research in this area. We do our education for social development is a little bit patchy. Some departments are really good, others aren't really anywhere. We're still at a journey, at the beginning of the journey, in terms of making our sports more sustainable. Partnerships are tricky. We don't necessarily ask people about their carbon footprints when we partner with them. In terms of the campus operations, we're starting to make some headroads in terms of where we get our energy from and things like that.
You generate your own energy here, don't you? You've got your own within your own building. So.
Well, we've got some of that, but we mostly buy our gas and electricity just the way.
But you also want to go to universities that actually account the emissions of the overseas students, their flights. You factor that into your emission. I mean, you're a very
that's part of Scope 3 reporting. So most universities should do that, and overseas students are very well. I'm not sure how many people know this, but this is overseas students are part of one of the biggest components of our Scope 3 emissions. So we at the university we have about 100,000 tonnes of carbon a year. Scope 1 and 2, which is gas and electricity, diesel is about 20% of that. So most of the emissions of Scope 3, about 80,000 tonnes. Of that, about 20,000 is attributable to overseas students and flights. So that's an enormous contribution to global warming. And we do a lot of business travel as well, about 4,000 tonnes of carbon through business travel. But the whole business model of British universities seems to be predicated on recruiting overseas students. So saying that Loughborough or any university is great in this
but that's the thing, but it comes from what you were saying, the educational, in history, if you're a history student, it's basically through the students, universities and things like that, where things change, policies change, we have to start with our education system. And Loughborough should hold its head up high, because I do reports on all universities and I've looked at all of them. And I said, you're by far the most in the sustainability sort of part, so you have a massive role to play within this. But you've got that in your hand. What's that? Is that the University of Ghana? What are they like? Do they count their emissions? Oh. Yeah, I'm thinking about that at all.
I just want to touch on something that Saul mentioned with respect to trying to play the devil's advocate with respect to maybe mobilizing South Africa, maybe Ivory Coast and things like that. It always baffles me when some people say they've been to Africa and they book their hotel in the city, capital city, and they come back and say they visited Africa and then they want to educate us or tell us how things work in Africa. I think the real Africa is when you leave those cities and do research inroad. And I see Paula smiling because she knows exactly, Paula knows exactly where I'm coming from. And so one of the things that influence some of the contributions that, for example, the lady over there was trying to say, and what Esther is trying to say, is that this is the realities outside capital cities. And if I'm telling you that there are implementation challenges, perhaps it's worth listening to, because not many people are privileged to have left the East Midland or even live outside the cities whenever they go to Africa. I think it's really important for us to factor that in, that it's not about a few having access to the wealth and the resources to support some of these transitionary agenda, buying electric vehicles, doing clean cooking and all this kind of thing. The vast majority of people, particularly areas that are extremely fragmented and distant from each other, rural areas. And I think that is where the practicality comes from. I think the other thing I want to touch on, which Esther also mentioned, is holding people to account. But honestly, I think we need to hold ourselves to account here as well. We keep pushing the boundaries. I think I was listening to the Vice Chancellor in one of our envoy scripts saying that the energy that will be required to power some of these, is it ChatGPT and the next generation will be equivalent to energy to power Austria. And we are not stopping. We keep pushing the boundaries, but yet we are saying, I mean, this mixed messages is a bit confusing, and that is why there is this fatigue in terms of technology transfer. I think we're talking about that, and Sam, another technology, they're bringing it again to Africa. Like seriously, you've not really addressed the fundamental issues, and you're pushing the boundaries here. For example, all the examples you're making in terms of the energy need and things like that. So where do we strike the balance? And yet you're pushing it on us to be able to be the one saving while we've been at the forefront and bearing the brunt of it. I think holding people to account is not just the rife corruption in Africa. Corruption is an English language, it's a word anyway, so it started somewhere. It's also trying to amplify the mixed messages we're getting from people who are pushing the climate agenda in the West. And I think that's why I said that word ecological imperialism you use in the morning. I like the coinage because that is what we are experiencing. And it's really difficult for people who are at the forefront. I touched on this yesterday, to assess none to even fight for themselves. It's really, really challenging. And the West find it a lot easier to push the boundaries to get more energy.
You know what he said about colonialism, basically land grab through environmental pretend? I mean, he mentioned that in the morning. He was literally saying that this could be seen as another way of the West getting
done wrongly. Done wrongly, yes.
It freaks you out. You just think, oh my God, type of thing. But I think there are a lot of people worried and a lot of people concerned. I'm more concerned about, like I say, direct pollution from vehicles, what we're breathing as we walk down the street. There's 109 carcinogens in petrol smoke. There's 79 in cigarettes. There's 25 in burnt toast, right? So basically, so it's bad. Don't burn your corn on the cob. Don't burn your corn on the cob. You're going to die of cancer, right? That's how you stop people from not burning the corn on the cob. But in India, I found one of the massive things was people spitting in the street and chucking their litter everywhere. They just chuck their litter everywhere. They are so like in the rural villages and stuff. They don't care about anything else. So, and then we see little turtles and stuff, and then it gets into the water and we're eating the plastics. I think that the world is just a bit messed up in it on so many levels.
Yeah, I want to come back when you mentioned that people, if they want to know Africa, they go out of cities.
Yes.
But how about the informal settlements and slums that are in cities?
I completely agree. I mean, I've done a lot of work in sanitation.
World, like you can see, and they are very close to like very luxurious settlements, and then you find or high income settlements.
I've done a lot of work in sanitation. I understand the peri-urbans and the things you're trying to talk about, but I'm saying the challenges when it comes to massive adoption of technologies and some of these solutions that will get us to net zero, you need to go outside cities. And I think it's what, I'm not saying cities are not important, don't get me wrong. I'm only trying to say for us to appreciate the realities, it transcends cities, because that is why most of these UN reports, most of their reports, they show you the side of the urban and they show you the side of the rural, for you to see the disparity and where progress are made in some settings and progress are not made in another setting. So I understand that there are challenges within cities, but also I'm saying that if we're going to move towards proportionate acceptance, we need to go up beyond cities.
Right. Yeah, and speaking on the scope 3, just to elaborate on that, those are the hardest emissions to calculate, because you're not in control of what producers do. For example, like in this room, you can say, for example, EMR company, what was the emission when they were producing this desktop? So it would be difficult for Loughborough or any other company to actually say what their scope 3 emissions are. So they can urge their producers and their suppliers to say, state what it is, but most times
you're hitting on the head there. What you have to do for your scope 3 is go to the person who provided you with the data center where you house your website and say, They're there. If you go,
Yeah, that's
there's
okay.
your emissions. So what
Yeah, but
happens
it's
is-
not easy.
No,
That's the
but
thing.
nothing's easy, but what
Yeah.
happens is, if you're gonna say scope 1, 2, and 3, and if
Mhm.
you're gonna put this thing out that you are a green company, whereas I know most of them aren't because of what I do, like I say, it's not accepted as net zero, but counting a light bulb is, which I completely find ridiculous,
Yeah.
on any level. But if you really wanna find out, the carbon emissions, whatever, of everything, you can, and there's enough calculators out there now. I was looking at a calculator just yesterday, basically, you know, this university here, they have a department called Digital Decarbonisation, right?
Mhm.
And they worked out the carbon footprint of a Formula One car. Formula One car in 1 second going around a track, every second sends 1 million bits of data to an AWS server. It's ridiculous the amount of digital electricity and stuff that they.
Yes,
So
that's.
they worked it
that's true
out
as
through the AWS server, what that does through that, then they brought it back to that. So there's some very clever people, but the problem is you haven't got anyone like a salesperson in the middle collating all this from these people and then making it palatable to the rest of the world. In isolation, though, everyone's doing it. But what it is, you're right, it is actually, this is going to
It's
require,
super
and it's
difficult,
not
yeah,
Greta
getting-
Thunberg, and it's not Dave
Yeah.
Attenborough.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, please say something, then I'm just going to ask if there's someone who hasn't spoken yet,
Yes.
who would like to say something, then please, don't go away feeling as though you wanted to say something and get a chance. So please.
I mean, I just want to look, I mean, you said quite a lot, but I also want to look from a different angle. In terms of the work that you're doing, the fantastic work that you guys are doing, how are you bringing in higher institutions in Africa and different universities in Africa? Are there collaborations in terms of some of this work and getting them actually actively involved with the researchers who are actually on ground? Yeah, are there collaborations going on? I mean, that's my question.
Yeah, so most of the RAs are from the global south, most of the RAs, and so we do a lot of so most of our research was in the global south, right? Helen is from Kenya and from Egypt. We have others from other different countries, so this is one aspect, and we also work with a lot of universities. Like recently, we have the University of Zambia and another university in Bangladesh. We're exploring the challenges and opportunities for electric cooking in Zambia and Bangladesh in informal settlements. So we have 2 universities will be working on this research. And we do a lot of work with other universities,
Yeah, University of Stratford. There are so many universities that we work along with. Or I think for all the countries that we are partnered with, we started with 15 countries, and I think now we have extended more to about 10 more countries, to include Brazil, Laos, and many others, including Turkey. So what we're doing is that we find our easy connecting point in terms of research through the universities and also think tanks within those countries, so that they can allow us to research ethically and also scientifically and bring these results now to national governments. Of course, we're also partnering with the national governments like the Ministry of Energy everywhere we go, and also Ministry of Environment. So we're kind of working with all sectors, the private sector, because all these technologies we're talking about, they are also developed by some engineers who are like businesses as well. So we're working with we're working with private sector as well. So we kind of inclusive looking at all the.
Paula? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that for the Ghana project, it was a collaboration between Loughborough University, University of Ghana, and also the University of Development Studies. The idea being that there was a north-south collaboration, but also the south-south, because University of Development Studies had less experience in research and were reaching out and wanting more experience in research. So I think that's also a nice model, because I think if you go to many countries in Africa, you can pick out really well-performing universities in each country, but there are also those that are trying to upskill and grow. And I think our natural thing as a global north researcher is to go to the one we know. But actually, we shouldn't be doing that. Well, maybe we should, but we should also be reaching out to universities who haven't traditionally had a track record in research, because you're right, growing those research skills is
I think one thing that will also help, speaking from Nigeria, and I'm sure other countries in Africa will have similar schemes. In Nigeria, we have the National Youth Service Corps, for example, where you have graduate students spend a year rural area, well, a lot of them in rural areas. So I served in a village, in Bauchi State. And when I say, I'm going back to what Shola was saying earlier on, it's a village where you can walk, what, 2-3 miles before you see the next house, you know? And so those are the kind of places where you have this, and I feel this schemes or the students that take part in these schemes can be real assets for you guys, because if I take one of your biofuel, for example, to the village, people are wondering, oh yeah, and that's one way of selling it to the, especially if it gives the alternative, and they see the alternative, especially for what you said, compared to the firewood or whatever it is. I think that would be a real asset for you guys if you can work with such schemes.
Okay. A quick one, because I can see people about to start leaving. And
Just one point regarding the issue like partner universities. I mean, I've done most of my research in the French-speaking countries of West Africa, and they get quite marginalized in lots of these research projects for the simple fact that people are not fluent in English. But I mean, the problems that they have are very similar. So yeah, just think about it.
No inclusion.
okay, thank you very much for that final, very appropriate comment. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much to Paula, Sam, Helen, and Yasmeen for a great talk.